It was 10 degrees below freezing on Christmas Eve when my father locked me outside for saying 6 words. "Dad, the turkey's a little dry." That's all it took. One slightly sarcastic sentence, one eye roll he didn't like, and suddenly I was standing on the front porch in nothing but a thin sweater and jeans, watching my breath turn to ice while my family laughed inside. If you've ever been punished for simply existing, you already know the special kind of cold I'm talking about. It starts on your skin, but it ends up somewhere much deeper. Before we get into how that night ended, with my billionaire grandmother turning my father's life into rubble with a single word, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I want you here with me in this story because nobody should have to relive this kind of thing alone. And if you've ever had someone make you feel small, powerless, or disposable, hit that subscribe button and like this video. This is a story where the problem child isn't the problem at all, and where justice doesn't just knock on the door, it kicks it in wearing Italian leather. All right, let's step into the snow together. The lock clicked behind me with a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't loud, not like in the movies. It was just a tiny metallic finality, muffled by the thick wooden door of my father's mountain mansion in Aspen. But I felt it like a punch to the chest. "Arya, you don't talk to me like that at my table," he'd said, voice dripping with theatrical disappointment. "You want to act like a child. You can take a time out." And then he smiled. A calm, casual smile that didn't reach his eyes, and pushed me out into the storm. At first, I thought he was bluffing. I actually laughed. I turned, grabbed the handle, and pulled. Nothing. The deadbolt slid into place on the other side, with that quiet little death rattle. I could almost picture him doing it with a flourish, maybe saying something to his new wife, Patricia, like, "She needs to learn respect." Snow was already piling on the porch, blown sideways by the wind. It slid down my collar like ice fingers. I banged on the door. "Dad." "Gregory. Seriously. It's freezing." Inside, I heard music, clinking glasses, distant laughter. Nobody came. The porch light glared down on me, viciously bright, like a spotlight on a stage where the audience had already gone home. Minutes stretched. The cold wasn't cute anymore. It was hostile. It needled through my socks, froze my toes, crawled up my legs. My hands went from stinging to burning to nothing. And through the big picture window, I watched my family begin opening presents. Patricia, perfect blowout, perfect teeth, posed in front of the 12-foot Christmas tree, laughing as my stepsister Reese ripped through shiny wrapping paper. I watched her tear open a silver box and pull out a sleek, high-end laptop. My laptop. The last surviving piece of my failed startup. The one I'd brought to the living room so I could sneak in some work after dinner. Now it was on Reese's lap like a trophy she'd won simply by being the favorite. I pressed my numb fingers to the glass. Nobody looked at me. I wasn't a daughter. I was a smudge on the window. You might be wondering why I was even there. Why, after my tech company imploded, I crawled back to a house that never felt like a home. The answer is simple and ugly, debt. I'd built an algorithm that was 6 months too early for the market. Investors panicked. Our runway vanished. Bankruptcy wasn't just a legal word, it was a cage. And the only lifeline I had left was my father's offer. Come back to Aspen. Get your head right. Maybe if you stop chasing fantasies, you'll learn something about real business. Real business, said the man whose entire empire came from a trust fund he didn't earn. So I moved in. And for 3 months, the rent I paid wasn't money, it was dignity. Little daily withdrawals. Silence when Patricia mocked my little app. Obedience when Gregory lectured me about discipline. Compliance when Reese tossed me chores like I was the live-in help. You don't notice how much you're losing when it happens 1 inch at a time. But standing there in that blizzard, toes going dead, watching my laptop, my work, my future, being unwrapped by someone who saw it as a toy, that was the first time I thought, maybe I actually am going to die because of these people. The wind howled. My jaw chattered so violently, I thought my teeth would shatter. My fingers stopped hurting, which I knew was bad. There's a point where cold isn't a sensation anymore. It becomes a quiet, heavy nothing, like your body is just giving up. I don't know how long I stood there before I saw the headlights. At first, I thought my vision was playing tricks on me. Two perfect white beams cut through the snow, followed by the long, low shape of a black limousine gliding up the driveway like a predator that didn't care about the weather. The car rolled to a stop in front of the house, engine humming quietly, expensive, confident. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out in a long cashmere coat the color of fresh cream. Her silver hair was cut into a sharp bob framing her face like a blade. She didn't hunch against the cold. She simply arrived, like the storm was beneath her notice. My grandmother, Josephine Harrison, a billionaire, a legend. The woman who built Harrison Holdings from a chain of failing car dealerships into a global portfolio of real estate, tech, and logistics. And who hadn't spoken to my father in 7 years. I hadn't seen her since I was 19. Her eyes landed on me. Just for a moment, I saw something crackle there. Not shock. Not horror. Something far more dangerous. She looked from me to the house. To the glowing windows. To the party that hadn't paused to notice their daughter freezing outside. Then she said one word. Demolish. I didn't even have time to process it. The limo doors flew open and 2 men stepped out, moving with the calm speed of a tactical extraction team. Black suits, earpieces, gloved hands. They didn't go to the front door. They didn't ring the bell. They came straight toward me. One on each side, they lifted me under the arms, boots crunching on snow as they carried me across the yard like I was a high-value asset who needed to be removed from enemy territory. My limbs were too stiff to fight. The cold had moved past pain into that soft, terrifying numbness. I remember the feeling of leaving the ground, the world tilting, the brief glimpse of Reese laughing at something on my screen. And then the limo door shut behind me with a soft, absolute thunk. Silence. No wind. No music.
No laughter.
Just the hush of filtered air and the faint scent of rich leather and something citrusy and expensive. Across from me sat Josephine. She didn't look like a grandmother. She looked like a CEO about to take a company apart at the molecular level. Her posture was perfect, her expression controlled.
No gasp.
No dramatic. Oh my God, Arya, are you okay? Emotions were for later. This was Tria. She reached to the seat beside her, lifted a heavy wool trench coat, and tossed it over me. It hit my shoulders with the weight of armor. Arms through, she said. Her voice was low, steady, and utterly devoid of pity. Hypothermia is a boring way to die, Arya. My fingers fumbled clumsily at the sleeves. I could barely grip the fabric, my teeth chattering so hard my skull hurt. The moment the wool wrapped around me, my skin began to prickle and sting as warmth crept back in. It hurt. It felt like waking up in a bad way. I looked out the tinted window. Through the glass, I saw my father in the living room, a crystal glass of wine raised as he laughed at something Patricia said. He looked like a king in his castle. He had no idea the castle was already under siege. My voice sounded broken, like it belonged to someone else. I just told him the turkey was dry. Josephine didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the house, studying it like a blueprint. You think this is about turkey? She asked. You think he locked you outside in a blizzard because of poultry? Finally, she turned her head. Her gaze was dark, sharp, clinical. He didn't do this because you were disrespectful, Arya, she said. He did it because he felt small. She nodded toward the window. Gregory was now performing happiness for Patricia, gesturing broadly, smiling a little too wide. That, she continued, is a man with a glass ego. A weak man can only feel tall, while someone else is on their knees. He needs a thermometer to measure his power. Tonight, your shivering is his proof of life. This isn't punishment. It's fuel. Her words hit harder than the wind had. For months, I'd been thinking I was the problem. That my failed business made me unlovable. That if I was quiet enough, obedient enough, grateful enough, I could earn my seat at that table again. But suddenly, she was rewriting everything. I wasn't a disappointment. I was a battery for a narcissist. He thinks he's teaching me a lesson, I whispered. Oh, He is, Josephine said calmly, reaching for the intercom. But he's about to find out he's not the only teacher in this family. She pressed a button. Cut power to the main house. A second later, I watched the lights in the mansion flicker and die. The Christmas tree went dark. The music cut out. The big, glowing windows turned into black squares. My father's silhouette froze. Inside the limo, the only light came from the digital dashboard, bathing Josephine's face in icy blue. "We're not leaving yet," she said, leaning back. "Warm up. I want him to see the car. I want him to know the checkmate is already on the board before he even realizes there's a game." I pulled the coat tighter around me, hands finally stopping their violent tremor. The house looked different without the twinkle lights and warm glow. Less like a fairy tale mansion. More like a tomb. "You know," Josephine said after a moment, "men like Gregory don't start with locking their daughters out in the snow. If he'd done that the first week you moved in, you'd have left." She eyed me. "It starts small. The jokes at your expense. The way he interrupts you in front of others. Making you wait. Ignoring your opinions unless they benefit him. He lowers the temperature on your life 1 degree at a time, so you don't notice you're freezing until your heart nearly stops." I stared at my hands. They were raw and red, but they were mine again. The shaking was gone, replaced by a different kind of trembling, anger, shame, realization. "I thought if I took the insults," I admitted, voice small, "if I just smiled through dinners where they dissected my mistakes, eventually they'd forgive me for failing." "You didn't fail," Josephine cut in. "You attempted something difficult. They have never attempted anything. They live off what I built and call it success. Parasites always hate the host that tries to escape." She tapped a screen on the center console. It lit up with a series of camera feeds. The house appeared in washed-out grayscale, security cameras streaming the inside of my own living room. The backup generator hadn't fully kicked in yet, so the only real light came from the fireplace and the glow of their phones. They weren't worried. They weren't looking for me. They were irritated. Patricia paced, gesturing dramatically, no doubt complaining about the ambience being ruined. Reese sat on the sofa with my laptop open, her face illuminated by the screen, smiling as she clicked into my folders. "She's taking my laptop," I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It had gone flat, cold. "That's my code. My intellectual property." "She's taking it," Josephine replied, "because Patricia has convinced her you don't exist anymore. In their minds, you're already gone. Deleted." We watched as Gregory poured himself another drink, completely unconcerned. "He thinks it's just a power outage," I murmured. "He thinks he's the only one who can turn the lights off," Josephine corrected. "He's about to learn he doesn't even own the switch." She picked up a sleek black phone from the armrest and spoke into it. "Execute phase 2. Enter the premises." The car doors locked with a heavy thunk. Outside, the 2 security agents started toward the front door, not with the shuffle of guests, but with the inevitable stride of a foreclosure. Josephine turned to me. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there, a question, an invitation. "You keep saying you have nothing," she said. "No money, no company, no power. But that's not quite true." I let out a harsh laugh. "What do I have, exactly? I'm sitting here in a borrowed coat. Everything I own is in that house." She smiled then, a razor-thin, terrifying curve of her lips. "You," she said, "have the deed, Arya. You just don't know it yet." The front door didn't open so much as submit. Josephine didn't bother knocking. She walked through the doorway like the house itself remembered who its true master was. The blizzard surged in behind us, icy wind coiling around the marble foyer, snuffing the false warmth of the place in seconds. I followed 2 steps behind her, flanked by the security team. I felt like a ghost climbing back into a life that had already held a funeral for me. The living room was mid-celebration turn chaos. The emergency generator had finally kicked on, casting a harsh yellow light over everything. Half-opened gifts cluttered the floor. The champagne on the table was losing its fizz. Gregory stood there, mid-laugh, glass raised. Patricia admired a diamond bracelet. Reese was, of course, typing on my laptop. They all froze when they saw us. My father's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, annoyance, then something close to fear. "Mother," he said, voice cracking. We didn't know you were coming. The roads." "Turn off the music," Josephine said. There wasn't any playing, but Reese scrambled for the remote anyway. Gregory snapped into performance mode, the charming patriarch mask sliding into place. "Really, Mother," he said, forcing a laugh. "You gave us quite a scare. We were just having a quiet family evening. Patricia, get her a drink. She must be freezing." "I am not cold," Josephine replied. But Arya was. She stepped aside so they could see me. Patricia's face drained of color. Reese's hands flew to the laptop, trying to hide it behind a throw pillow. Gregory didn't look ashamed. He looked inconvenienced. "Arya," he sighed, like I'd spilled something on his rug. Always so dramatic. "I told you, Mother," she stormed out. She couldn't handle a little constructive criticism. "You locked the deadbolt," I said. My voice was rough but steady. "After pouring yourself another scotch." "Details," he said with a dismissive wave. "It's a drafty house. We were protecting the pipes." Josephine turned to the man standing beside her. I hadn't even noticed him in the limo. He'd moved like a shadow. Now, under the emergency lights, he looked like every nightmare an unethical CEO has about their lawyer. Calm, immaculate, lethal. "Mr. Vance," she said, "is the timeline established?" "Yes, madam," he replied. "We have gate logs, thermal imaging from the car, the timestamp of the lock engaging. At least 45 minutes of exposure in sub-zero temperatures." He glanced at Gregory. "In most jurisdictions, that's attempted manslaughter," he added mildly. "In this family, we call it breach of contract." Gregory laughed, too loudly. "Contract,"
he scoffed.
"This is my house. I discipline my daughter how I see fit." "That," Josephine said quietly, "is where you're mistaken." Vance set his briefcase on the coffee table, right on top of a plate of untouched appetizers, and snapped it open. The sound echoed. "You don't own this house, Gregory," Josephine continued. "You never have." His smile faltered. "I have the deed." He jabbed a finger toward the hallway. "You signed it over to me 10 years ago. It's in the safe." "You have a piece of paper," Josephine said. "A forgery I allowed you to keep because it kept you busy and out of my portfolio. The ink on the real document dried 26 years ago." She pulled a thick document from the briefcase and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy smack. "Read the beneficiary line," she told him. Gregory picked it up. His hands, suddenly, weren't so steady. I watched his eyes move across the page. And then I watched something inside him crack. This says," his voice strangled, "the estate, the land, the company were placed in a blind trust," Josephine finished, "to be transferred to the first female heir upon her 26th birthday." She turned her gaze to me. "Happy birthday, Arya." For a moment, the room swam. I saw the tree, the gifts, the people who'd spent months making me feel like a burden. Then I saw that document on the table, my name printed there like a lifeline I didn't know existed. Gregory tore his gaze from the paper and fixed it on me with pure hatred. "You," he hissed. "You knew. You planned this." "I knew nothing," I said. And for once, it wasn't an apology. It was a revelation. I thought I was broke. I thought I was lucky to sleep in the guest room. "You are broke," Patricia snapped, jumping in. "This is insane, Josephine. You can't give everything to her. She's a failure. She crashed her own company. She cannot run an estate." "She didn't crash her company," Josephine said, and the temperature in the room dropped in a way that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. "She was sabotaged." Vance slid another document onto the table, this one filled with charts and numbers. "We traced the short selling on Arya stock," he said. "Some very aggressive whisper campaigns spooked her investors, all originating from shell companies tied back to Harrison Holdings. Controlled, on paper, by Gregory." My father's face went pale. "He needed her desperate," Josephine said softly. "Needed her under his roof when the trust matured." So he broke her legs financially, then offered her a crutch. She stepped closer, eyes never leaving his. And then he kicked that crutch away, in a blizzard. Gregory slammed his fist on the table, sending an ornament rolling. I raised her, he shouted. I put food on this table. This is my home. As of midnight, Vance said, utterly bored, "You are trespassing in your daughter's home." The room went very quiet. "What do you want to do, Miss Harrison?" Vance asked. Not what does she want, as in Josephine. What do you want? The axis of my world shifted. My father's eyes darted around the room, wild and calculating. I watched him brace himself to switch tactics. Begging, guilt-tripping, the "but we're family" script, I knew all his lines. I looked at the big window, facing the front yard. I could almost see the faint outline of my own footprints out there in the snow where I'd been left. "I want him out," I said. My voice was calm. "All of them. Out of my house." Patricia gasped. Reese's hand flew to her mouth.
Now,
Vance asked. "The weather." "Exactly," Patricia cried. "You can't throw us out in this. It's dangerous." My gaze drifted to the heavy coat around my shoulders. The one Josephine had given me when I had nothing else. I remembered the feeling of the cold door under my fists, the sound of the deadbolt. "I don't want them out tomorrow," I said quietly, but every word carried. "I want them out now, and they leave with what they're wearing. Nothing else." For the first time that night, Josephine smiled in a way that looked almost
proud.
"You heard the owner," she told the security team. "Clear the building." Gregory lunged toward me, but one of the guards caught him by the jacket. "Arya, listen," he shouted, voice cracking. "We are family. I was trying to make you tough. The world is cruel. I was preparing you." "You succeeded," I said. They dragged him toward the door. Patricia shrieked, clutching her jewelry, trying to snatch a bag on the way out, and being firmly stopped. Reese stumbled after them, eyes wide, hugging herself. The front door flew open again. The storm roared in, delighted. I followed them to the window. They shoved my father out first. He stumbled, feet sliding on the ice, and dropped to his knees in the same snowdrift where I'd been standing less than an hour earlier. He spun around, eyes wild, looking up at the house like it might apologize. "Arya," he screamed, voice muffled by the wind. "Open the door. Don't do this. Don't you dare do this to me." I placed my palm against the cold glass. Our eyes met through inches of crystal and air and a lifetime of uneven power. "Demolish," I whispered. Then I reached for the velvet curtain cord and pulled. The heavy drapes slid shut with a soft, final hiss, erasing him from my view. Erasing the man who had built his warmth on my freezing. Inside, the room immediately felt different. Not warmer, exactly. Just
Nini.
behind me, the only sounds were the crackle of the fireplace and the quiet scratch of Vance's pen as he finalized the transfer paperwork. Josephine walked to the bar, poured 2 drinks, and handed one to me. "That," she said, raising her glass, "is how you handle a hostile takeover." I let the glass warm my fingers before I took a sip. The burn of the alcohol was nothing compared to the burn of standing up for myself for the first time in years. "Welcome home, Arya," she said. "If you've ever had to freeze before you finally found your fire, you're not the black sheep. You're the survivor who hasn't been paid yet. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment you realized you weren't the problem, they were? And if this story hit a nerve, if you felt that twist of indication in your chest, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. You're not powerless. You're just one revelation away from owning the whole damn house.